What up, everybody? Scuffy here, and today it is time for the Ruinstorm card by card. First off and foremost, I was going to do a Blood Angels card by card. I really was. I recorded the whole thing, and then I was like, this seems like I've done this before, and I had. I had actually done the Blood Angels card by card about 6 months ago, right after the last update that they received. Now, testing and experience with that really hadn't happened a whole lot, and I think the cards were pretty self-explanatory as far as the improvements that they received. The new neutrals from the Defenders of Caliban, or the Angels of Caliban expansion, had not been added to the game, but in all honesty, I don't think the Angels of Caliban expansion neutrals add much to the game. So, a little intro on why I'm not doing the Blood Angels card by card. I don't see anything different or adjusted. Quite frankly, if you're interested, you want to see Blood Angels card by card, let me know. But otherwise, take a look at the card by card library that I've already got set up, because the Blood Angels, as of right now, until they get a significant overhaul, they don't need one. They don't need a reboot because they've been covered. And that was right where I left off when I decided to do the reboots for the card by cards, because I figured that Ruinstorm was going to be getting a change. I said, these guys are too powerful. I'm not going to do a card by card with them and then have to go back and re-record it. But there's been enough changes with all the other cards. I should go back and redo those, and I did. 6 months later, here I am. I'm finally back to Ruinstorm, and they did receive some changes. They did not receive as many changes as I thought that they would. However, where they are currently sitting, I think is indicative that the changes they received were substantial enough. So we're going to do a card by card for the Ruinstorm. I'm going to give you my breakdown as far as how these cards work, ideas to use them in new and interesting ways. It's a little bit harder for Ruinstorm, and I'll explain why in a second, as well as ultimately which cards are worth keeping an eye out for in the shop, which ones you can pass on. So first off, we're going to start with the Warlords. We're going to start with Korvax's Utter Blight, and I have decent experience, decent fun with Korvax. I kind of stopped playing him there for a little bit because then I picked up Kabando and just ran wild with Kabando. Korvax's ability initially on release was Relentless Poison a random enemy troop, and I think then it was pay 2 to heal 1 to all of your troops. And then they reversed this because the poison a random enemy just for free every turn. There was no way, especially early in the game, that your opponent could keep any of their troops alive. There's just not enough poison healing. At the time, there wasn't enough poison healing. There still has not been much added, although they've increased it with warlords such as Miros and the recent change to Garrow, who can now heal poison as well. But before, there was really just Mortarion, and that was kind of it. Those were your options. So if you didn't have Mortarion, you were not going to have any troops on the board. And that was a negative play experience for people. Not entirely powerful. He couldn't win every game, but it's no fun playing a game that you just don't get to play your cards. So they changed that, and I think that was a solid change. I think his change where he's at now is interesting because he's got this pay 2 energy poison a random enemy troop. However, this is important to note because the way this works in the game is, whether this is by intentional design or this is because of the coding, it will never poison a troop that has already been poisoned. Once you poison a troop, then if you use it again to poison another enemy troop, it'll be random for the troops that have not yet been poisoned. So if your opponent's got 4 troops on the board, you can pay 8 energy. You will poison all of them. It's a guarantee. It will happen. You're not going to see poison pop up a second time, which is surprising when you think about it. It's still powerful, but it costs him all of his energy to do that. And those troops are still going to have their opportunity to act on their turn. So there are some cards that, like, if you're using Silent Death with him, you're going to get a little bit more value out of it. But it tends to be a better value for dealing with stealth troops with Survivor, that maybe your opponent isn't going to want to attack with, or if you've just got no other way to deal with a big nasty that's going to stick around for a while. It's decent. And his Relentless Heal 1 is a very strong, very nice ability. So no hate there. No hate there. Korvax is Superior Demon of Nurgle. He's a Demon Lord of Nurgle, and he works just fine. Now, Kabanda, wow, yeah. I played Kabanda a lot, and I won't lie. I picked him up. This is the alt art from the Summer of Skulls. I still do not have the original. That's why I picked him up for the Skulls for the Skull Throne event, because anytime you see a legendary Warlord in the shop and you don't have them, it is worth picking them up. He's unstoppable. He's got Berserk, and on your turn, he's +1/+0. Now, that seems like he's a flying Angron. In a way he is, but he's actually a little less than Angron, because that Berserk is going to force him to attack on his turn. Okay, that's what you want to do. He's a 3 attack. But on your opponent's turn, he's just a 2 attack. And if you're facing off against Angron, Angron is probably one of Kabanda's hardest matchups, because Angron's endgame is he wants to get hit, and he's going to hit you harder, and then he's going to get Gorechild 1, Gorechild 2, and you will have no option except to slam into his 4 attack, 5 attack face. And that's unfortunate. Thankfully, Kabanda is not tied by the same conditional that Angron has, where he can't run troops. Kabanda works very fine leading troops. He actually has to kind of rely on them in the late game. Now, he didn't have this General of Khorne card before. At the start of the release, he was just a legendary Warlord, and that was it. And then they gave him this General of Khorne because he felt underpowered, or maybe they felt overpowered, and this was trying to be a nerf, because this is added to your hand, so it's one less card he has to start with. Now, 16 costs. Every time he attacks an enemy troop, it goes down 1, so he has to attack 6 troops for it to cost 10. If he becomes the General of Khorne, he then has an ability. He still has that Berserk. He's got a fixed 3 attack, so he's no longer conditional there. But then he can just pay 2 energy to put in play 2 Bloodletters. And Bloodletters are fairly decent. 3/4. Give +1/+0 to your troops this turn with Berserk and Rage. Okay. I can pay 2 energy, and I can get 2 of those guys. That's 8 energy worth of troops. That's a significant General of Khorne leadership ability. That's nice. It's hard to do. It's not something that you build Kabanda for. You don't aim to go into that mode. However, there are some games, I can say this because I've played quite a few Kabanda games, there are some games and there's certain matchups where that is where your game is going to end up, whether you know it or not. So you kind of push the envelope, and your opponent might think, oh, I'm whittling down Kabanda, and then you go into your General of Khorne mode. You've got a couple of demon troops already on the board. You survive, and then you just use his ability to just put 2 Bloodletters in play every turn. You're no longer attacking. You don't need to. Your opponent has to respond to those demons. And I have won many of the few games. I've only gone into that General of Khorne mode, I would say probably a dozen times. But most of those games I won because I changed up the strategy and I knew at that point where the game was going. It's not something that you build for. Typically, you're building to do damage, attack fast, attack hard, and just win the game that way. However, it's entirely possible with enough healing, and if your opponent is playing enough troops or low attack, low health troops, that you can achieve that and move into that mode, and the game pacing switches, which is really nice because it's different than the end game scenario for Angron. If Angron goes into his Demon Prince mode, he just hits you faster, harder for twice and wins the game. Like, that's it. Kabanda can go into his General of Khorne mode and sit back for 3-4 turns and overwhelm you with demons. So, yeah, Kabanda is... Now, he took a hit. He took a big hit in the fact that with that General of Khorne ability, taking away an extra card. But that was all that got changed to him. There are several other key cards within the Ruinstorm faction that were changed that really impacted the play rate for Kabanda. Not necessarily him, but the cards for him supporting, and Ruinstorm as a whole, to be honest with you. Kairis. Kairis is fun. She's okay. I've got more games with her, I think, just because at the time, my only option for playing Ruinstorm was play Kairis, and then eventually I got a Corvax, and then I picked up that Kabando in the Summer of Skulls, and I was off to the races. Kairis is interesting. She's got that battle honor, and I like warlords who have battle honors. Put in play one Warp Rift. And the Warp Rift here is this little funky structure. It's a 1/3, can't attack, relentless, reduce the cost of demons in your hand by 1. That's a structure that your opponent cannot ignore. They've got to get rid of it. And even better, if for 0 energy, you can destroy this unit and refill 1 energy. So even if your opponent doesn't kill your Warp Rift, they deal 2 damage to it and it's got 1 health left. You have the option to either A, keep it on the board and let it sit there, let it be another target for your opponent, or play a demon, play a troop, use this, gain an extra energy, and maybe play a second troop. It's entirely possible. Kairis has also got the pay 1 to deal 1 damage. That 1 damage can go to any troop, which is nice. It can go to your troops, and there are some troops in the Demons and the Ruinstorm faction that have got a rage mechanic that can trigger. You can give mutations, which can trigger with rage. So that can be very helpful. It's not super reliable, and especially with some troops like Oro Squad from the Orphans of War, that's a very strong, frustrating start for Kairis, because she's going to have to take like 3 turns to deal with these guys. These guys are going to shut down any of her troops that she's got to deal with. So there are some hard matchups for her. There are some hard starts. Thankfully, she's got high initiative, so if she's lucky enough to get the jump and get some bodies down on the board, she might make it through. But her games tend to be very, very dicey. Very dicey. I've had more reliable games with Corvax because of his healing pool at low initiative than I have with Kairis. And that says a lot. I mean, 6 losses there at 24 versus almost 13 at 41 games. I don't know. Do the math. Let me know if the play rate is bad. Samus. Oh, gosh. Samus is cool, man. I should play more games with Samus. Unfortunately, Samus received a nerf shortly after he was added to the game. Samus has got this pay energy, 2 energy, and before it was just give can attack into your next turn. That was his ability. That's all it was. It didn't deal damage like Flame Master Modrum from the Night Lords. It was just pay 2 energy to always lock down a troop, lock down a warlord, whatever it was going to be. I understand why it had to be done, because essentially this was an almost auto win against warlords, mono warlords, like Angron, Jagtai Khan, maybe even you could argue some of the loyalist warlords such as Vulcan. He can put out troops, so I mean he's not as hard in there, but I mean a Vulcan that focuses on using the Udracool to really clear the board, that could be damaging. So that ability was changed to be a rotating ability in the way that Shuriken's ability every turn is you pay 2, it can attack. The next time you use it, it's going to deal 2 damage. Then it goes back to the can attack and then 2 damage. He's also got this Whispers of Madness card, and that's actually a nice little surprise that sometimes people forget about, is take control of an enemy troop with 2 or less health. The really nice kicker with that, and this is important to note if you want to play Samus. Samus is everywhere. He's the man beside you. Look out. Samus is here. He can use that to steal troops that have got Survivor and low health, and you still get them. So if your opponent's got this Fire Drakes out, right, and it's got 2 health, Survivor 3 is still activated. Boom. I whisper to it, I lure it to my side, and now that Fire Drake is my Fire Drake. And it's a nice little way to give a warlord a 1-turn steal hard removal option. Costs 3 energy. I think that's a suitable cost depending on what troop you're getting it for. Sometimes you can use that just to take control of a front line to win the game. It's very tricky though, because you've really got to time it right. You don't want to throw it away on a troop that's only got 1 health, and your opponent's going to kill it on their next turn. Because it doesn't give it fast, it doesn't give it flank. You're not going to use it for anything. But if it has a relentless ability, if it has now a resolution ability or some other passive buff, that's a good card to steal. It makes for a great target. I like Samus. I like Samus a lot. I play Samus. I should play Samus a little bit more as far as it actually goes here. I've played Kairis as my least, Samus, and then Korvax, and then finally Kabando. I would say I probably would rank Samus a little under Korvax, only for the simple fact. I think that's right. I actually played Samus more, but I would still rank him under Korvax only for the fact that his ability got changed. I still enjoy putting can attack on a big nasty unit. It buys me time to deal with it or put things on the board that then they can't destroy. That's really nice, but it's not every turn. It's not as consistent. In terms of these warlords, none of them are bad. Kairis is probably the weakest for 30 health, and because as I've kind of already indicated, if she doesn't get the jump out, it's harder for her to establish her warp rifts out there. And her ability is probably the least useful. It can be pinchful, but it's not as effective. But they're all good. They're all good. But really, what wins the game for the Ruinstorm is not the warlords, it's the troops and it's the mutations. And that's really what this faction is all about. Now, what's interesting about this faction is that they can only use the chaos neutral cards. So while you've got those 4 warlords, you've only got access to this pool here of cards, demons and tactics and some not so great infantry, and then you've got access to the Ruinstorm cards. That makes it very hard to build a unique Ruinstorm deck. It's possible. I think Corrupted Arcology is a great card to add to these guys to give you cultists and make that thing. I think I kind of went with a cultist for my Samus build. Otherwise, a lot of your demon cards that you're going to look at, that we're going to take a look and see, those are pretty much just going to be what's the bread and butter of your deck. And you're going to want them to be the bread and butter of your deck. Now, Mirror of Hatred. Deal 1 damage to all units. It's okay. It's handy in a pinch in sealed events, or if you've got warlords, or not warlords, demons who have got a mutation upon them that gives them rage, deal 1 damage to all enemy units. It's a great way to pay 1. You deal 1 to everything, then you deal 1 to all the enemy things. I wouldn't throw it in a deck. I'd rather rely on other tactics, but it's potentially useful. Hang on. When we talk about the mutations, that is, like I said, that's the bread and butter of what the faction is. Mutations. You give them 2 friendly demon troops. That's the only thing that they can go on. And they are a list of things. They are all sorts of abilities. You get 3 visible to you. You get to pick one. Is it going to be Frontline? Is it going to be Ward? Is it going to be Cleave 2? Is it going to be Flight, Unstoppable, and a +1/+1? Is it going to be Terror? Is it going to be +3 attack? How about Flank? No? How about Poisonous and +0/+2? Maybe I want that Molten Blood, which is the one that deals 1 damage to all enemies. Or Survivor 2. Wow, that's a lot of mutations, right? On top of that, a mutation reduces the maintenance cost of demons. That's not listed on the mutation itself. That's part of the mechanic. So, if you're playing with your standard demons, you're like, hey, you know what? I've got myself a Softpick in there. Many people call him Warp Chicken, but we're going to call him Softpick. He's got maintenance 4, but I bring him in at later in the game, and I throw down 2 mutations on him, which give him Survivor 2 and Ward. Now I've got a 7/8 Ward Survivor 2, Greater Demon of Tzeentch, but it also reduces his maintenance by 2, and then he will become a maintenance 2 for that. And then on my next turn, I'll have 2 extra energy to continue the terror. Mutations are game winning. They're like the more ways that you can put mutations in your deck, the better. That's ultimately how they win the game. They are random. in terms of what 3 options you're going to get, but the wonderful thing is you could get 3 options, and one of those ones is at least going to be better than the other 2 in the situation that you're at. If the worst options you have to choose from are, oh, do I give terror, flank, or cleave 2 to my units? Oh gosh, I don't know. What do I do? I mean, that's still not bad. Flanking is always useful. Cleave 2 could be handy if you're playing a troop opponent. Oh, do I get frontline, ward, or survivor 2? I mean, is ward and survivor 2 a bad choice? It never is. I think the worst choice you could probably get is terror, but the way the mutations show is it's 3 different choices, so you're never going to get terror, terror, terror. You're going to get terror and 2 other choices to choose between. Now, don't get me wrong, terror as a mutation is great later in the game if they've got a very high attack, but just by itself it's not fantastic. So mutations are the way to go, and this is a common card. There's just one copy of it. There's other ways to make copies of this card from other troops we're going to see, but you should really put at least one of these in your deck. Mutate your demons. Take them to the store. Give them a bath. Give them a bath in the warp stuff, the warp juice. Mutate is good. It's a good comment. I have nothing to say about that. Plague Toad. Wow. Let's talk about another card that people have just really, it amped up the game. In the same way that Oros from the Orphans of War kind of makes this a powerful 2-drop, Plague Toads can be a powerful 1-drop. Now, they can be easily dealt with just the same, but they're harder and they're more frustrating for your opponent, especially if they get a bad draw and they're not able to respond, because these guys have Relentless, put and play another Plague Toad. And then you have that Plague Toad sit back, and then you get another 1/3. Another 1/3, and then you give them some mutations, and maybe those mutations give them extra health or give them Survivor 2. And then suddenly your board is just a bunch of Plague Toads plaguing all over the place and hopping over your opponent. These are the Ruinstorm's version of souped up Nurglings, right? That you don't have to redeploy. They're going to put on the board for you. This is a great rare. If you're going to build a Ruinstorm deck, you want to have 2 copies of these cards. You don't have to play them in every game. Some of the decks I have, like at certain matchups, there's no reason to play Plague Toad versus Rom. That's a bad idea. Playing Plague Toad against Korax or against Kurz is not a smart move. It just isn't. You're going to give him an endless supply of ways to duck out of combat. However, most other games are not that case. So Plague Toad is a thumbs up for me. Unspoiled Land. Draw a card. If it's a demon, add a copy of it to your hand. So if I started my turn, I pay 1 energy, I drew a Plague Toad, I get a second Plague Toad, and then I play that one of those Plague Toads, and I still have one in my hand. Okay, what if I play Unspoiled Land, I get a Chaos Fury. I get a second Chaos Fury. It's really nice. It's kind of a hyped up version of Void Engagement, but instead of dealing damage, you're getting an extra copy of a troop versus drawing it, and if it's a tactic. Now, it's got to be a demon, so it cannot be an infantry or a vehicle from the Chaos card pool. It has to be a demon, but that's not hard to do. This is a good card. It's not a 2 of. I think it can be handy as a 1 of just to give you some troop options. It's okay. Kerbasi is not. I'm a pass on this guy. First off, he's a 2 energy for a 1/4. Stat-wise, that's a fair exchange. However, his ability is pay 1 to gain a mutation. So I'm paying 1 to gain a mutation, but it doesn't let you act again. It doesn't do anything else for you. So you're just putting a lot of energy and effort to pump this guy up with mutations, but he's not going to be able to do anything with them. There's no speed there. At least with Plague Toad, you're getting a body right away, and he costs 1 less. You don't have any mutations there, that's fine. If you want to get troops that get mutations and that attack, the higher rarity cards for the Ruinstorm are the way to go, or just find ways to create mutations in your hand. And we're going to see several troops that do that. Parting the Veil. Now, Parting the Veil is a little bit more specific as opposed to Unspoiled Land. Unspoiled Land is drawing a card, and then maybe if it's a demon, you get a copy of it. Parting the Veil is going to give you a demon. You get to choose from 3, and then add it to your hand, which is nice because you get a choice. This is a good first turn if you don't have any other troops to play. You might draw and see that you've got an option to pick a Yuria the Seducer, and you're facing Angron, or you're facing Vulcan. That's a good card. That's a good way to go. Maybe you're facing Lucretia, and one of your options is a Rot Swarm, and the other option is Chaos Fury, and then your third option is, I don't know, Slayer of Worlds. Those are all good. Those are all good. Which one's going to be the ones you get? Like, just having options is never a bad thing. I have one of these in most of my Ruinstorm decks, just as that option, because sometimes what I've included is not good enough. Now, Rot Swarm, these guys used to be really obnoxious. These guys were not good for the game. They were not good for the game. They need to be changed, and they were changed, but they are unstoppable. They've got poisonous. And when an enemy dies, put in play a Rot Fly. Now, Rot Fly down here is a 1/3 poisonous. Almost the same thing, right? The difference is he doesn't have all that extra text. Well, the problem was, before, instead of putting in play a Rotfly, just put in play another copy of Rot Swarm. So you could kill 2 units in one turn, and then you would get 1 Rot Swarm, and then you would get 2 Rot Swarms, and you would fill your board with Rot Swarms. For every 1 unit that died, you would just populate with Rot Swarms that you could give mutations to, that then you could buff up and get swarmy and swarm all over the opponent. And it was just a really, really hard uphill battle to deal with that if you were a player who was playing troops. Throw in Korvax's poison ability, and you could see how that could be very frustrating. So I think it's a suitable change. Rot Swarm is not as necessary as they need to be. I do have one of them in a few of the decks, but I find that some of the demons punch harder, and Rot Swarm is just kind of good for a distraction. We've already talked about Warp Rift a little bit, and it goes in any deck. It doesn't have to be just in Kairis' deck. It is both a handy distraction, a useful tool. If you want to play a Ruinstorm or Demon Ramp deck, it is entirely possible to do. There are enough frontline Demon troops to put this behind late or mid-game and benefit from. So Warp Rift is okay. Now, Chaos Fury is probably one of my favorite epics in the faction. I think this is one of my favorite epics. Very low cost. They've got Unstoppable. They've got Stealth. And when they come in play, they gain a mutation. And that gives you right off the bat, you're going to get a choice. What type of mutation am I going to give them? Are they going to be a 3/4 with Unstoppable? Are they going to be a 2/5 poisonous Unstoppable? Am I going to give them Ward or Survivor? What am I going to do with these Chaos Furies? There are just so many options. Early game, late game, great card. Great card. If you see these guys, you do want to pick these up. They are just a great 3-play. So yeah, highly recommend. Highly recommend the Chaos Furies. Demonettes are a common that are also very useful at 3. If I had to choose between playing a Chaos Fury or a Demonettes on the second turn, you play the Demonettes first, because they gain stealth if you have no other troops. Then the next turn you benefit, you play Chaos Fury. That's just, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing. That's a strong turn 2, turn 3 play. Sneak attack for 4. Going to get rid of most things. Then it's going to have a little bit of a target on it for that 2 health, but that's okay. But that stealth, even late game, sometimes your opponent is tapped out. You've got no other troops on the board. You throw down a Demonettes. You've got 4 attack in the bag. That's just a nice card. And the fact that it's a common, I really like. It's accessible. It's something that the demons need, that the Ruinstorm need, is to put that pressure on. Now, Eternal Rivalry. This is one of the cards that was changed, that really kind of took the wind out of the Ruinstorm's sails, as it were. Before, this was your Warlord gains +1/+0 and Bloodthirst, which could turn your Kabando into a 4 with Bloodthirst, which was 8 damage, unstoppable. Now Eternal Rivalry just turns your Warlord into +2/+0 until your next turn. Now it's nice that it gives it until your next turn, so it's going to be a little bit more defensive against Imperial Knights, against Angron, any other Warlord who's going to try to attack you. Russ is another. Rus. I just found out the other day when I was playing Battlefleet Gothic 2 Armada that it's pronounced Rus. That's news to me. I don't know if I dislike that. I'm okay with it. But either which way, it's okay, but the change is a really significant change in terms of how it plays. And that was a tool that both Kabando, Kairis, sometimes even Korvax could rely on late game to burst out, boom, 6 damage, 8 damage, whatever it was going to be, that combo with another troop on the board, and you could win the game. Now that's not the case. Now you're talking about 4, maybe 5 damage at best. Path of Blood is a really good common here. This is a card that gives a mutation. Now, you might look at this, you're like, oh, this costs 3 for a mutation. Why don't I just play one of these? Well, the difference is that Path of Blood has got replay value. If it didn't have a mutation, you get this card back. If you did have a mutation, you still get a draw card. So either which way, you're gaining from it. I typically like to keep Path of Blood and just play that as one mutation on each troop that I can, so I always have the option for a mutation. Maybe late game go for a second mutation to seal the deal. That's actually not bad at all. You could have 2 or 3 troops on the board and in a turn pay 6 energy. It's a little high cost, you might think, but with some of the mutations, you benefit. You're going to get a rewarding investment. If you invest heavily in mutations, this is a bull mutation market from what I've been told, and the dividends it pays out are high, and I suggest that you buy now. And if you're looking to buy now in mutations, Plaguebearer is your broker. This is the guy that you're going to give a call. You're going to tell him to beat the drum and buy, because when an enemy dies, put a copy of Mutate in your hand. It is so easy. Mid, late, early game, anytime your opponent has got a board set up and you've got a Plaguebearer in your hand, drop them down, you attack with a couple of your units, maybe your Warlord, you create 2 or 3 mutations in that one round that you then use to bolster your units that you have on the board, giving them additional attack, survivor, frontline, whatever the case may be. Maybe you're just even going to bolster up this Plaguebearer to be gnarly. And then on your next turn, you're going to do it all over again. Your opponent can see it coming. The Plaguebearer is a threat. They are a common troop, a very powerful common troop that your opponent cannot ignore. They have to get rid of. And yeah, they come in very handy. You want to have 2 of these in your deck. If you are playing Demon, now if you're playing Cultists, if you're just doing a bunch of Cultists, maybe you don't want to do mutations, that's fine. But if you're going to do Ruinstorms, and you're going to do Demons, you're going to do mutations. That's all there is to it. There's no reason not to. The Fallen, these guys are okay too. Stat-wise, 3 for a 4/3 frontline. Now, the offset is that they've got Berserk, and that seems like it's an offset. But what if, on the next turn, this Plaguebearer creates a couple mutations that I throw down on the Fallen, and now he's got extra health, or now he's got more attack, or he's got Survivor 2. They're not bad. Frontlines, especially for some Warlords like Samus, Kairis, and Korvax. I guess that's almost all of the Warlords, to be honest with you. They're going to be good to have. I've got 2 Fallen. They're cheap troop. I think all the 3 cost troops are solid. Chaos Fury, Demonettes, Plaguebearers, and the Fallen are all solid for this faction. You should play with them. You won't regret it. And the fact that 3 of those 4 are common is really good. It makes it easy for a player who wants to experience the demons just to dive right into it. Now, you've given out those mutations. You want to get crazy with it. How about Unrestricted Frenzy? First off, this is going to give +1/+1 to your demons. But if they've got mutations, let's give them an extra +1/+1. So it's going to be +2/+2 to units that are probably already jacked up and beefed up with mutations already, right? If you give him a Demon Wings, he's a +1/+1. Now he's a +3/+3. That's not counting any other mutations that you played. That's not counting any other abilities that troop might have, such as Chaos Fury, that has already given itself a mutation, or Plague Toads, which are going to stick around. Unrestricted Frenzy is a must. In the same way that the Emperor's Children enjoy their Unbreakable Focus, Unrestricted Frenzy, high value, so good. Now, Bloodletters. Now, we talked about Bloodletters a little bit when we talked about the General of Khorne. These guys here actually were scaled back a little bit because their rage before was give +1/+1 to your troops. That was it. Like it was +1/+1 to your troops until the end of until the start of your next turn. I think it was until the start of your next turn, I believe. So you could use him. There was some timing in there where you could play him, and if your opponent damaged him on your turn, you were still going to get that attack bonus. I forget the time. I'd have to take a look back on it. They scaled it back so that it's only on this turn. So if your opponent is attacking the Bloodletters, the attack bonuses will go up, but at the start of your turn, they're going to go back down. Versus, so you're really only going to gain that value if you've got multiple troops on the board and you're attacking with the Bloodletters first. But they're still a 3/4. I don't put them in decks. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, I don't put them in decks. I do use the General of Khorne to bring them out. I find that the 4-cost troops, there were other ones that I prefer, but as far as a common goes, this is a great way to increase the attack of your other troops. You've got a horde of Rotflies or Plague Toads. Let's attack first with the Bloodletter of Khorne, and now they're all +1 attack. So that's how you do that. Delisle. Now these guys seem on the surface cool. It's a 4/4. Artwork is decent. Pay 2 energy to put and play a copy of Demonettes. Alright, well, I like those guys. Problem is that it just puts in play a copy, so the Demonettes don't gain stealth. They're not going to be stealthed in here. It's a little bit of a trap. I'd rather attack with the 4 that I'm guaranteed versus paying 2 energy to put a troop into play that my opponent is most likely going to be able to deal with on their turn. It seems like a waste of resources there. Elatil. Oh, talking about mutations. This guy, he likes it. He's a Mighty Fury. He's unstoppable. He's got stealth. He is starting out like a Chaos Fury, right? You're like, okay, stealth, unstoppable, cool, all right. But when he receives a mutation, he gets +1/+1 as well. Now, unlike Chaos Fury, which starts with a mutation, Elatil doesn't start with a mutation, so he's most beneficial when you've already got a mutation in hand or 1 or 2 that you create on your next turn before you attack with him. He can end games very quickly. I've gotten him up to like an 11, 12, or even higher if you're hidden up with the talons, the flensing talons on there, and his attack goes up. Just beefy. Give him Ward, and then he gets +1/+1. Give him Survivor, he gets +1/+1. This is a great legendary. It's a low-cost card. It's effective. Don't miss it. If you see it in the shop, it's a legendary worth picking up. Poxbringer. This is another 4-cost rare that I like. This is pretty standard. Relentless, heal 1 to your units. Now, we just saw some changes to the Death Guard where they've got Resolution, heal 2 to your units, to your other units. Poxbringer does 1 to all of your units, which includes itself, and it comes in a little bit cheaper. Fairly decent. And because it's a demon, yes, it can get those mutations, it can get stronger, it can get nastier, it can be very helpful. Super critical in Kabando games where any little juice of extra help and healing is important, and if your opponent cannot ignore the Poxbringer, then they're putting resources into that creature versus your Warlord, so that's always a positive. I like Poxbringers. Those are a must-have. Don't be surprised if I'm saying all these must-haves, because the Ruinstorm faction, despite the Warlords kind of getting a little bit less play today, their faction as a whole, as far as the cards within them, they're pretty good. Now, Tides of Madness is a card I see a couple times. I don't use it as often as I did when I was first started playing. I think it's because my card pool for the Ruinstorm is complete now. But if you don't have a completed Ruinstorm card pool, I think maybe including 1 copy of this is not bad, because you put and play a copy of a friendly demon. So for 4 energy, you can copy a 7 energy demon, 6 energy demon, whatever the case may be, 9 energy if you really want to get crazy with it. So you get good value there. But that's about it. I mean, you're not getting anything else. You're not going to get the rally effects. You're not going to get anything that it comes with if it doesn't come with stealth built in. So I think as time goes on, I just find other cards to play in lieu of this, or I'd rather just actually have troops to play. Cathedral the Mark. Now, this is don't get me wrong, this is a very powerful card. Give your Warlord, create a random demon in your hand. A random demon can be from the Ruinstorm card pool, or it can be from the Chaos card pool. There's a lot of demons in here, especially low cost, mid cost, high cost demons. There's also one, and this is a very important one. A lot of people overlook this. Tillamoth. Tillamoth is a demon, folks. It's a Mechanicum demon. It stuns all enemy vehicles, structures, and Titan weapons. Why is it a Mechanicum? Don't ask me. I'm not gonna try to justify or explain. I don't know, but that's important, and it's come in handy several games. That is a powerful ability because it gives you almost an endless supply of troops. The downside is it is a 5 energy card, so it is a very costly play in momentum. To play the Cathedral Mark versus playing a 5-cost troop or a 4-cost troop. On top of that, it does not do well for warlords who have got a short lifespan like Kabando or Kairis. This is really a card designed for Corebacks. I can't say designed for, but it works best with Corebacks or Samus. It works really good if you pick this up from like a Pyramid of Photep or a Jubok or a Kaizulane. But otherwise, Corebacks can gain a lot out of this card because he's got that healing built in. He's resilient. He's playing for a long game. He's going to be frustrating, and then you can throw out just a non-ending supply of demons of various shapes and sizes. That's strong. It's not for every warlord. If you saw it in the shop and you don't want to play Corebacks, you don't want to play Samus, you can pass on it. You're not going to miss anything. It's not going to hurt your feelings if you don't have that. Demon Brutes. These guys are okay. I like the picture, but that's about it. They rally, they gain a mutation, and then for 1 energy, they gain a mutation. The rally gain a mutation is cool. You got me hooked there. That's cool. But again, we're going back to pay 1 to gain, but not attack again. It's not much different than Kerbasi. Except that hopefully he's already gained a mutation. At best, he might gain flank, and then you've got a 4/5 flanker. 4/5 flanker that technically, I guess, could pay 1 to gain another mutation if you want to. But again, I'd rather use a couple of these other 5 costs over Demon Brutes. Fell Reaver, talk about frontline, talk about demons. 4/5, you take your 4/3. And then you amplify it to a 4/5, but then you give that nice little juicy relentless ability to give +1/+0 to your demons, and you have a frontline troop that your opponent does not want to stick around, because it's going to get +1 to him and all your demons. It's just a gnarly visage too. Look at those teeth. Just a good card. Good card. Hairless Lanash, another good card. This one comes in at stealth, and she can pay 1 energy to give a mutation to a friendly demon troop. Now, she can't give it to herself. She can't mutate herself there, but she can mutate the next demon that you play on your turn. And you play another one. Let's say you play a demon chosen at 6 energy. He comes in with a mutation. Then you give him another mutation, and then he gives himself a mutation, and so on and so forth. She's really handy to do it that way. On top of that, she's a 5 attack in a pinch. So at the very least, you've got a 5 attack stealth unit that you can throw out there. Maybe you give Unrestricted Frenzy. You use her to boost some mutations. Then you play Unrestricted Frenzy. Then you've got her beefed up to a 6/5 in stealth mode. And just a good card to have. Now, again, at that 5 energy mark, it's a little tricky if you go with her or not. If you don't go with her, as far as commons go, Plague Ridden is not a bad common to have. While he's not giving you any mutations, he is going to give you a never-ending supply of demons as long as you keep having demons die before this troop. When a friendly demon dies, put a copy of it in your hand. The only downside that can happen with a Plague Ridden, and it's a slim downside, but I've seen it played a couple times on people who get a little overzealous with their Rot Swarms or their Plague Toads, is that their hand then becomes full of hot Rot Swarms and Plague Toads, and their board is full of Rot Swarms and Plague Toads, and they can't play those. And then they begin overdrawing their deck, and then you kill everything, and they can replenish it again with all those little 1/3s from their hand, but they've lost one of the other cards that are in their deck. It's not great. That's not a bad scenario by any means. I mean, it's like, oh, too many troops. That's not a bad problem to have. But that's really the only downside to this. I think he's got like he's got a hand or another mouth in his mouth there. Kind of looks like a xenomorph thing. I'm not sure if that's what they're going for. He's got 3 eyes though, so hard to say. He is a Nurgle demon. But yeah, if you don't have Hairless Lanash, I think Plague Ridden is a good choice. Fel Reaver is also a very good choice. It's tricky including all 3 of these guys because your deck, you don't want it to be too high cost. You want to have a little low energy pool for the Ruinstorm so that you can make good use of tactics as well as mutations. Play those and get some combos out. Planetary Trap, now thematically, this is a very cool card because it's exactly what the Ruinstorm was. They were a system-wide trap, but stun and deal 4 damage to 5 random units in play. Okay, that's strong. It can hit your guys, though, and it can hit your Warlord. Sometimes you kind of want that, but the timing of stunning on your own turn means that you're stunned, and then your opponent has got their whole turn, and then you're still stunned on your turn because you got stunned. It's not good. Don't get stunned on your own turn. Planetary Trap is not worth playing in my mind. I don't, unless you're trying to do like an end game, like if you want to just deal 4 damage and roll the dice and hope that you can win the game that way. I'd rather play Defensive Satellites. I'd rather play Artillery Strike. Or if I had to do self-damaging tactics, then Volcanic Instability because it's not going to stun me. That's just me. Bioblade is another card that is not in the same way that the Cathedral of the Mark. Bioblade is also going to lose some energy there. Now, the awesome thing is your Warlord gets +1 attack. Your Warlord gets poisonous, which means that your opponent's troops that are attacking your Warlord are not going to survive. That's cool. 6 energy is a very steep cost for that. Very steep cost because at 6 energy, you want to be playing troops that are powerful. You want to be playing Demon Chosen or Secrets of Slaanesh. Bioblade doesn't work for me. I have not found that I keep it in any of the decks that I've had it in. When I first started playing Ruinstorm, I didn't have too many legendaries. This was one of my first legendaries, so I made it work. Eventually, I found that I didn't want it in the deck. I took it out, and I have not regretted it. So you can pass on Bioblade. You're not missing anything there. Demon Chosen. Don't pass on these guys. This is another legendary that is a must-have. These guys are great. Just like Chaos Fury, they come in with a mutation. It's a rally. And then on your turn, here's what we've been looking for. You're paying 2 energy to gain a mutation. Okay, we've seen that before. But can act again is the juice. That's what you want. Boy, he can if he survives. If you get a Demon Chosen on the board, and with that rally, you are able to choose either Brass Collar or nope, not Flensing Talons, Stupefying Mark. Your opponent will be very sad, and they will have to hope. They will have to hope that they've got something like Winnow of the Week or Conqueror, which is a random destroy all, right? It just straight up clears the whole board, or even Sedition's Gate. If they're able to use Sedition's Gate accordingly, maybe that they might be able to make something work with that. Otherwise, on your next turn, you're just going to have a fun time paying energy to give this guy mutations, jack him up even further, and then go to town on your opponent and just slabberdash him. Yeah, Demon Chosen wins games if he survives. Now, surviving is not always a guarantee. You might not get those mutations. Your opponent might get lucky with their removal options as well. But Demon Chosen, boom. Number 1 legendary, Elatil number 2 legendary. Elatil can get beefy, but he doesn't have that potential to gain a mutation right away. So, absolutely. Fracture in Time is okay. The downside is it returns all troops to play in hand. It's kind of a way of a soft removal, but it doesn't reduce the cost. It doesn't do anything positive for you. And if your hand is full, your troops are going to go away. Now, on the other side of that, if your opponent's hand is full, their troops are going to go away. So that is something to keep in mind. That's something to think about and consider. As a one-of, maybe as a gamble, as a risk, it's worth it in a few of the warlords like Kairis, Samus. I wouldn't put it in Corvax because Corvax is about building up and healing your stuff anyways. You don't want to have to invest in troops. With that, keep in mind, I mean, if you're playing with mutations, don't play Fracture in Time, because then you're going to get your troop that you put all those mutations in, and you're going to have lost all of that. So if you're going to play with mutations, don't play with Fracture in Time. But if you are playing without them, consider it. It is an option. It's a board-wide soft removal. It might work for you. Now, Seekers of Slaanesh is the other card that was a big change to this card. This card before had Rally, Destroy a Friendly Troop, and it gained Sneak Attack and Fast. Now it doesn't. Now this has Flank automatically. Okay, that's cool. 6/4 Flank. All right. But Rally, Destroy a Friendly Troop, and it gains Sneak Attack. That Rally is not optional. That really is not optional. These guys are not friendly. They're not friendly at all. You have to get a troop out to give them flank and sneak attack, and that's all you're getting is flank. It was easy for them to come out and win the game. As I said, you could combo it very easily. Eternal Rivalry, dealing 6 to 8 damage from your Warlord, and then you finish it off with the Seekers of Slaanesh, sacrificing like a Plague Toad, and that's another 6. Once those two cards were changed, the play rate for the Ruinstorm dropped significantly. I think their success rate could still be good, but they took a big hit there. This card is still okay as a flanker, but I would not want to play it if I have other troops, because then I have no choice but to lose those troops just to give this sneak attack. It's hard to argue that that's a fair exchange. I guess in some games maybe it is, but nah. Vanguard of Hell is not a great card. Don't play it. I've played plenty of event games where this card still is not a good card. It's okay. I mean, you put in play 2 Bloodletters of Khorne. That's nice. We already talked about that. But you're given a Maintenance 2. So you're paying 6 energy to put 8 energy worth of troops in the board, but then you're sacrificing yourself for 4 energy. Just doing the math there, you're paying 6 to put in 8 to give yourself reduced by 4, so you're actually paying 6 to give yourself 4 energy on your next turn. That's if you're playing this on curve. Not worthwhile. Not worthwhile. If those had Frontline, if the Bloodletters of Khorne had Frontline, that would be a solid play. It is not. They don't do anything for you. Pass on that card. Warmonger of Khorne. Here's a frontline guy. He's got Berserk. We've seen that before. Rage, +2/+0. Okay, but I like the fact that he's got 5 attack. He's not susceptible to Ambassador Mugatory. He's got 6 health. He's not susceptible to just Breach. It's going to take a little bit more juice to get rid of this guy. And because he's a demon, you might give him some mutations. Does he go in every deck at cost 6? Not necessarily. However, in all the decks that I took Seekers of Slaanesh out of, I put Warmonger of Khorne in. So I don't feel like that's a bad downgrade. It's a little change in pacing. It's a little bit more defensive than offensive, but it still works. These guys are good. As much as the artwork is not fantastic, and this guy is about to devour the head of a Space Marine there. It looks like a Blood Angels. That's it for you, buddy. They've got Relentless. Put a copy of Mutated in your hand. That's it. Guaranteed every turn this thing survives. As a 6/9, it's entirely possible that it will, especially if maybe when it comes out you put Ward or Survivor or some other juice on it. Juice is the word today. I don't know how to put Gidagel. Gidalajal, Spawn of Chaos. He's a good card for 7 energy. He becomes a target, and sometimes that's what you want. And in some decks, you play 2 of these. And we'll talk about one card to explain why. Harbingers of Cygnus Prime. Again, another bloodthirsty demon with frontline. You see a trend here. These guys get Berserk. That's fine. Rage. Deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Now, it's nice if you give them Rage and then you give them Molten Blood, and then every time that they get damaged, they're dealing 1 damage to every enemy and then 1 damage to a random enemy. They can clear a board just by getting attacked. That's kind of cool. I've got, I think, 1 or 2 of these in my my Corbacks deck, but I don't put them in every deck because they're costly. That 7 energy is a tricky cost within the faction because it's harder to play and combo several troops or tactics with 7 energy as opposed to 5 or 6. Warmaster's Deceit. This is a good hard removal option. You destroy an enemy troop, you get a copy of it in your hand. There's no downside there. There is no downside there. At the very least, you're getting rid of an enemy troop that you may or may not play, but you still have the option for it. And especially if you save this for, let's say you're playing against that Orphans of War, and you know they've got Cadmus Tyro coming up. They throw on Cadmus Tyro. Now he's dead, and you have a Cadmus Tyro. Or how about let's get rid of whatever frontline nasty that you've got out there that you parked in front of your Warlord. Now I've got a copy of that as well. That's going to keep my guys alive. This is just a good card. I don't know if you need to have 2 of it in every deck. I think you should have 1 of it in every deck. As far as epics go, I would probably say that's probably a number 2 epic. You've got Chaos Fury as my number 1 epic. And then I would say Warmaster's Deceit is a solid number 2 there. Khorne Blood Crushers. Now, these guys don't have frontline, and that's probably why I don't play them. They've also got that Rage, deal 1 damage to all enemies, but late in the game for the Ruinstorm, I find that protecting your Warlord is really important. So these guys lacking frontline, if you don't have enough frontline options, you can always put on the Aegis of Rage and give them frontline if they get mutated. That would be really gnarly. But they're kind of a pass for me. Now Oola, this is an 8-cost card, which is strong. However, it's a stealth 7/7, and then it's got this amazing ability that is hard removal. In a way, it's kind of like a Warmaster's Deceit. For 1 energy, you're dealing 4 damage. That can go on your opponent's Warlord. If it kills the target, you get a copy of it in your hand. So you can deal 4 damage to your opponent's Warlord. You can destroy troops and get copies of troops, or you can just straight face bash for 7. Oola is strong. Now, Oola doesn't go in Kabando necessarily because Kabando is more of a faster build. Oola goes in Corbacks. Oola goes in Samus. Oola might get squeezed into a Kairis if you're able to get some Warp Rift action and get Oola in cheaper. If you can bring Oola in at like 5 energy, your opponent's going to be a little sour. The same thing goes for Asharoxashi. I like the art. I like the Keeper of Secrets is a standard staple when it comes to demons and Warhammer 40k in general. That's a classic. Rally effect is great. Put in play 2 demonettes. Now again, we talked about these guys don't have stealth when they come out, but then you've got 3 units that have got all high attack and they all have sneak attack. And if your opponent doesn't have widespread damage like artillery strike, defensive satellites, astral warfare, whatever the case may be, they're going to get just lit up by Keepers of Secrets and Demonettes just slashing and crab clawing all over them. It's costly for 9 energy. I think you get good value for that 9 energy because you're getting, just with the rally effect alone, you're getting 6 energy in troops. That's not counting the ability that this thing has at 8/7 sneak attack. Does it go in every deck? No, it doesn't. It's just in the same way that most of these high-cost cards don't go in every deck. Bloodthirster doesn't go in every deck. It's a great card. Classic. Everybody knows about the Bloodthirster of Khorne. That is a standard stable. This is some old art right there that kind of reflect that. I think it's a good homage. But it doesn't go in every deck. 10/10. Rage, game +2. Okay, it's kind of overkill at this point. If this guy hits the board and he survives, you kind of have the game won. The fact that he doesn't have Unstoppable might surprise you. until you go back and you remind yourself, like, oh, wait, that's right, the original Bloodthirster of Khorne that was added to the game, the Slayer of Worlds, this guy doesn't have Unstoppable. If he doesn't have Unstoppable, why should that Bloodthirster? You know why he does? Here's my explanation for why he doesn't have Unstoppable. He doesn't have Unstoppable because the Bloodthirster will stop to kill everything in his way. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to you. That's my logic. That's the logic that I use. Why should I fly over these skulls when I should chop them off with my axe first? That's what he's doing. That's his job. He is thirsty for blood. He's not thirsty for your warlord. Khorne doesn't care whose skull adorns the throne. He just wants skulls, baby. So, we talked about all these high-cost demons. We talked about Gidajal. We talked about Harriers, Cygnus Prime, Oola, Duel of Heralds. They all tie into the sealed pack strategy. This is a very, hey, look at that. You got the artist's name in there. Oh, I just now noticed that. No, wait a minute. No, those are actual names. Those are character names. Nicely done. Nicely done, artists. I didn't even notice that. Sealed Pact. So, put in play up to 3 friendly demons that died this game. So you have endured. You've endured all of the attacks with Korvax and Samus. You've lost some Plague Bears. Maybe you've lost some Fell Reavers, some Plague Ridden. Maybe you stretched it out and you got to the Gidajal, Harriers of Cygnus Prime. You're big, nasty frontline guys. And then you pay 10 energy, and you bring 3 of those guys back. This card is exponentially better than the Chaos, the neutral version, which does Pax Chaotica, brings 3 random demons at the cost of destroying all your random troops. This one here just puts 1 demon in with a friendly chaos, like Mass Offering, deal for, like, that is oodles above all of these high cost neutral cards. That is going to give you 3 troops that you already paid for earlier in the game that could be high value. Now, the downside of that is, if you are playing a deck that really wants to capitalize on the early game with Plague Toads and Rot Swarms, maybe some Demonettes, you're going to be sad. Because then the chance is that you paid 10 energy and you get 3 Plague Toads. That's not what you want to get for 3 energy. Or for 10 energy. You don't want that. So if you're going to go about the sealed pack strategy, my advice to you is this. It's a good card, but if you're going to play sealed pack, do not play Plague Toads. Do not play Rot Swarms. Strongly reconsider playing Demonettes. Everything else is okay. I mean, you're never going to go wrong with bringing in some Plague Bearers or some Chaos Furies. That's fine. But keep in mind what it is that you want to bring out with Sealed Pack. Otherwise, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So, and we're going to talk about the counterattack for the Ruinstorm. This is the last card here. This card makes sense. Deal 1 damage. That can be to you. That can be to a troop. That can be to your opponent. It's kind of universal. It works very nicely with Kairis' ability. In the event that she loses out on that initiative here, she can still use that to help take out a troop. It works really nice with Korvax, who might have to deal with a Jubok or a Farron's militia behind a front line, whatever the case may be. It's a nice little way for him to kind of help secure the board without having to pay energy. I like it. It works really good in a pinch if you needed to use it to lash one of your Harriers of Prime or another Bloodthirst with the Rage effect and jack him up a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. It's got a lot of applications. It's a good counterattack. So I don't dislike it. I think it's probably mid-tier for me. I always grind my teeth when my opponent plays it against me because I forget that they have it. I don't know why I do. But I do. So that's the Ruinstorm as a faction. Now, the downside is, as I said earlier, I mean, they can only use this Chaos card pool. So when I talk about neutrals that they can benefit from and how you can give them applications and kind of make your own deck, it's hard to make massively unique decks there when you've got this very smaller pool to work with. That's something that they have to overcome. Now, you can do the cultist side. You can definitely do cultists. I think Command Bridge is a good card if you've got a few select tactics that you're going to want to get, whether that's the Cathedral the Mark, the 10 cost, Summoning Rift, no, Sealed Pack. That's what it is. Sealed Pack. If you want to go that route and you want to get that card, that's great. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, it's okay. I'd rather play the tactics within the faction stuff, mutation, and all the other things. I don't need to play Command Bridge for that. Atham is really important for Kabanda, just to give him Survivor 2. Not necessarily huge with everybody else, because there's not a lot of troops, like I said. Like, if you return a troop back to your hand, you lose out on any of the mutations that you invested in it. So very rarely is it beneficial for you to bounce back a demon into your hand. However, we're talking about demons here. Let's talk about the cultists, because Cultist Acolyte works really well with Samus. You can throw down a Cultist Acolyte, you can lock your opponent's Warlord so that they can't attack, and then you can get the sacrifice going off. You can do the same thing with the Cygnus Fanatics, building up juice with all the cultists, right? And with this new keyword, cultist, with this new little text added on here, the cultist mechanic as a whole really takes off to a new level. So it's a lot easier to do cultists. I think it's entirely possible. I think a cultist Samus is probably the better of all the cultists, although I would like to try out a Kairis cultist. Tocholka Enshin, this one's new, and I think it's not bad, because this is a great way for it. I mean, it's not bad, it isn't. But if you've got a little less troops, or you're looking for that chosen, this is a great way to get that demon chosen into your hand and make sure that you've got it when you want to play it. Silent Death is a super critical card for Korvax Outer Blight. You should have 2 of these in your deck. It's a common. It comes from the Prospero expansion. It is very important because you can poison a board and then play Silent Death, and that board will die. Otherwise, here we've got Cultist Brew, we've got the Cultist Sorcerer, Ekertrez, super important for healing, especially for Kabanda. Hellspawn, it's okay, right? You're going to get +1, +2, +1 to a demon. I love the artwork for it. I love the artwork for that, looking up and like, oh man, somebody's in trouble. However, +2, +1 to a friendly demon for 3, or I could just pay 1 energy for mutate. So if you're looking to boost demons and you don't have mutates, Hellspawn is an okay way to go. Informant Network you are going to need. You are going to need that with Ruinstorm, because they don't have really any other way to deal with stealth. So make sure you've got that. Their options really here are within this Chaos faction, the neutral faction, to deal with stealth. Artillery Strike is another good way to deal with stealth. Watchers in the Dark is new to the game. They have stealth themselves, but they also are kind of a soft way to jam and jam, which will break the stealth of whatever it is. Doesn't stun it, but it does jam them. So there's that way to go. If you're playing with cultists, you could play Outraged Noble. I wouldn't. I'd pass on those guys for just more cultists. I talked about Corrupted Arcology. I think this is a really cool card. I think Corrupted Arcology works well with Korvax. It works well with Samus. Not so much everybody else. And then I would say Monsters of Pythos, because there's nothing wrong with a giant 6'4" stealth monster coming out and hitting your opponent's hand, especially if they have dealt, or they're trying to deal, with all of the units that you have stealth with. You're hiding in the warp, you're hiding in the shadows, you are things of nightmare, you are fickle creatures, and everything that comes out pops out and does damage, and then you do stealth. Now, the downside of having a bunch of troops that have stealth is that your Warlord is then going to take the brunt of the damage. So, again, some Warlords are good for that. Some Warlords are not good for that. Please keep that in mind. And that's it. There really isn't a whole lot that are available to them to work with. I can't go into the other factions because it's just not an option for them. However, Ruinstorm plays very well because there's such a huge synergy around mutations, and demons. And the mutations themselves do things, and the mutations can be added on top of each other. You can play Miasma or Rot on a troop 5 or 6 times to give them extra health, or to give the Survivor 2 multiple times. They just do what they do. They're going to come out of the warp, they're going to be mutating, and they're going to be demonic, and you're going to make your opponent scared. They have lost some steam with a couple of minor adjustments. I got to admit, I'm pretty surprised, because like I said, 6 months ago, I thought I would be, oh, man, we're going to be seeing some crazy adjustments, but we really haven't. However, the few adjustments that were made were important and impacted the factions as the play, I think, for the better of the game. So that's it for me, guys. That is the Ruinstorm card pool, card by card. This isn't even a reboot. This is the first card by card for the Ruinstorm, but let's do it. It's been rebooted. Here we go. Next time we're going to be talking about the White Scars, which is the last faction out of the Malevolence expansion. And then we're going to get ourselves into the Angels of Caliban card by cards. So keep your eyes peeled. Keep looking out for those. Let me know what you think. What cards do you like playing with? What Warlords have you found most useful? Are you tired of Kabando? Are you tired of Korbacks? Do you want to play more Samus? I think you should. I think you should. That's it for me, guys. Until next time, keep playing Legions, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.